Well, hello everybody. We got Curly Express or Dwight, Wigwag Workshop, Hot Dog Pilot Andy. Let's see. It says there's 6 here, but I'm only seeing. Oh, wait a second. There's Artie from America. Well, there's still a person that still has not shown up or hasn't said anything, according to Google. But yeah, it's one of those things of trying to get everything ready, and then all of a sudden it's like there's one thing I'm missing, and I'm like, okay, well, just throw it and go from there. Basically, adding more foliage to the diorama. That's my current plan, anyway. Is finding out a little bit more about the broad gauge era that I'm aiming for. The railroad that I'm doing. It said that they were adding a third rail in the early 1870s. It was like they were. If I remember correctly, it was like 1873 that they had a third rail all the way, an extra third rail, dual gauge all the way from Birmingham to Albany. Spies in the background. Okay then. But yeah, it's one of those things of so there's a good chance that my layout will. I was actually thinking about doing this anyway because it's the information up until then. It's more of it's like they've added a third rail by the 1870s, but didn't they actually say when? I haven't been able to find information when they actually removed the outside rail and were fully engaged in being standard gauge. I actually, from my understanding, there is no quote standard gauge in the U.S. The reason why why a lot of the railroads went with the 4 foot 8.5 inches for the quote standard gauge is because of the Transcontinental Railroad Act, which basically said that, hey, this is the gauge of the railroad that is going all the way out. And yeah, it could be a lurker. I've done that many a times that I haven't been on a chat. Sometimes it's because usually there's a delay with the chat. From what I've seen, it's you type something in and then they finally respond maybe 3 minutes later or something like that. But hello there, Joe Raider. Thank you for coming in. But yeah, I haven't found an end date for when they stopped with the broad gauge. I mean, technically, there are still broad gauge rail systems out there, but they're usually they're not interconnected like they used to be during the 6 foot gauge era. With the 6 foot gauge that was started with the Erie. And then as railroads wanted to connect to the Erie because, they're bigger or wider, send more stuff that way. That's why there was a network of different railroads that connected to it that was 6 foot gauge. Up in Canada, they were using a 5 foot 6 gauge. It wasn't official, the official gauge of Canada. But it was the only one that could get. It was the only gauge that was available to get funding. from the government. So that's why they wanted, it was one of those things that wasn't official, but since it was the only gauge that was had funds for it, that's why a lot of Canadian railroads started out at 5'6". But then I guess when there was when the Transcontinental Railroad came along and said, "Hey, we're going to be 4'8.5". That's when everyone decided to, try their best to go to that gauge. From my understanding, the Pennsylvania Railroad and the New York Central was actually 4'9". Which was sort of kind of within the tolerance of the railroad. I'm not sure what the tolerance is at full scale, but I get the impression that half-inch was close enough because the great gauge change down the south, that's what they actually went to. They didn't go to standard gauge. They went to 4'9", and then eventually, moved it over that half-inch. But there are, quote, broad gauge systems that are out there. There's in fact, I think there's a museum out there that's broad gauge. I think it's 5'2". And that was, I think that's considered Pennsylvania trolley gauge or streetcar gauge. I think it was set up in Pennsylvania that, if you wanted to build a streetcar line, it had to be 5'2". And that was, to make it so it was harder to have standard gauge trains, which is 4'8.5", to go down on the rails. I remember going down, I think it was in Philadelphia I was in, and they had the tracks there, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Not, going down and all that. And then all of a sudden I came across this one street that had tracks in it, and I'm looking at it going like, why does that look so narrow? And then to find out that it was a standard freight line. So it was like, shorter. Also, if I remember correctly, the Bay Area Transit Authority, or BART, is also 5'6". Let's see. 2 of the states are still using broad gauge. It's the main line of that state. They have a national standard gauge running next to it. Yeah, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Artie, but I believe that's 5'3". For some reason, I'm thinking that 5'3", and there was also the standard gauge for Ireland. I'd be completely wrong on that. Yep, 5'3". Nice. Russia originally started out as 5 foot. That was, and I think if I remember correctly, that was basically so, again, to keep, trains separate. Hello there, Jerry. Thank you for coming in. And thank you for letting people know that, well, I sort of like let people know that I get here at 6:45. Tonight I was a little late because I couldn't find everything that I was planning on doing tonight. So it's, it happens. But yeah, standard gauge is not, quote, world standard. I believe Japan has their standard gauge is, I'm trying to think now. I think it's 5'6" or 3'6". Yeah, 3'6". Now the bullet train, or the Shenzhen, if I'm saying it correctly, that's built to 4'8.5". Well, hello there, Russ. Thank you for coming in. And that uses quote standard gauge equipment, but it's in the view of Japan, it's broad gauge. Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of perspective. I believe South Africa is. I almost want to say 3'2". I could be wrong on that. It's one of those things of, obviously I'm not I know a little bit of everything, and sometimes my information might not be correct. But if I remember the track gauges in Australia, now I'm forgetting which. There's like standard gauge in the center, and this east and west have either the broad gauge 5'3", and then the other side is 3'6". And yep, that's absolutely the having the quote standard gauge. It's a lot easier to have. It's a lot easier to build parts and all that, because all the parts are all the same gauge. If I remember correctly, Spain is 6-foot gauge, but the feet they use are Castilian gauge, or Castilian feet. So that winds up being about 5'9", something along those lines. Yes, we are talking about gauges. One of the things I'm planning on doing is doing a broad gauge layout eventually. Right now I'm practicing on dioramas. And that's, sort of figure out how the track gauge is going to work and all that, and how it's going to look. Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's what I knew the standard was in the center, but I didn't know which one was the broad side and the narrow side. So, all right, broad gauge is on. That makes sense now, because I used to work for a company that that were trying to do stuff in Australia, and there was talk about, we have to do this narrow gauge instead of standard gauge, and that was because, and it was in Western Australia. For for the last 8 years, all right. Yeah, it's one of those things of, I think my assumption is that eventually most of the major lines, like in the United States, are going to be standard gauge. But they might wind up. The Great Western was 7 foot. There is an actual broad gauge society that does the Great Western and the Brunel style of trackage. Because Brunel, not only did Brunel have the wider gauge, but also how the tracks were put together were also different. Very, very different. And because, Brunel thought he had some good ideas, and then some of his ideas were, Brunel is, I almost want to say, is sort of similar to Thomas Edison in the United States, where, some people were basically worshiping him, saying that he was the greatest. And then, yeah, I have not personally seen. Obviously they stopped doing broad gauge. If I remember correctly, the broad gauge in England was the last of the broad gauge standards that were there, because I think it lasted into the 1890s. I want to say. However, it was before moving film, so there's no pictures. It's sort of like the stuff with the Civil War. Oh, that's interesting. Quick change bogey on them. Yeah, there was something that would be interesting to actually model. It was called, if I remember correctly, was the Ramses. Let's see, that's not it. That's not it. Here it is. The Ramses car truck shifting apparatus. Apparently, according to this article, there was two ways. There was it was set up so it could do different setups. Yes, I agree, Andy. There's some things that I've seen. It's like, oh, that's cool and all that, and then there's things that's cool, but it didn't work. The one was the atmospheric railway, where they had these tubes going down the side and all that, and it moved with basically atmospheric and vacuum. It was one of those things of when you look at it, I don't even think with today's technology it would work properly. But I guess they were able to get it to work for a short time. Then eventually it just got the major problem I think they had was with the leather and the grease that they had to use, because rats kept on eating the grease. But I think even with today's technology, with plastics and nylon and how the system worked and all that, I still don't think on how it would work properly. Ooh. They had a clamp straddle machine that went on cars and could lift up 4 cars at a time. They didn't swap the trucks and the locomotives. Yes. Hello there, Mystic. Thank you for coming in. Let's see. I have a pulse. I am breathing. So I got the basics down. There's times that breathing is a bad thing, like when you're underwater. But no pulse test just ruins your whole weekend. But yeah, right now we're talking about different gauges and all that. Not quite sure how we got onto that subject, but yeah, the Ramsey truck shifting apparatus reissued patent RE8259. But yeah, I think if I remember correctly, the last one that was used was on the East Broad Top, from, if I remember correctly. And that was used right up until the initial closure. Yeah, thinking that could be a little on the hard side, but another. But yeah, it's one of those things of I think when it came to the break of gauge, it got to the point it made more sense to uh, now containers are used, which is Quister. Yeah, containers have. I just recently watched a video that had to do all about containers, and I had always thought that it was started in the Netherlands, or the Dutch, or some European country, and it seemed that there were other attempts at doing containers, but it wasn't until somebody in the United States that actually had to do with the trucking industry that someone turned around and figured out how to make a container that would go from a flatbed to a ship. They originally were 33 feet, but it didn't catch on until all the different players with containers and all that got together. Took them about 10 years to decide on all the little details, that how everything would work, like how would they connect, what sizes were they, and so that's where they came up with the idea for what's called the TOW, which is the 20-foot equivalent unit, I believe it's called. And then they had the 40, which is the larger one. And that started. I was surprised to find out that was started in the United States, and eventually it caught. The 20-footers wound up getting caught on, mostly in Europe, but they had the 40-foot is sort of the standard, the worldwide standard. That's why when you saw the Ever Given getting stuck and all that, it had mostly the 40-footers on it, not the but the 20s were usually on the lower end, because 20s can 20-foot containers can get into European countries a lot easier. But there are interestingly enough also 10-footers and 5-footers. A 5-foot container looks really weird because it's almost very small. I found that out one day when I was I work in shipping and receiving now, so it's one of those things that I was looking into. It's like, what's the different sizes of containers, and I was actually surprised to find out about the 10 and 5-foot containers. They got open ones, and it's like there's all different variations of the same thing. But it's the 20s and the 40s that they're named sea cans, because they're the ones that go on the sea. A lot of times you see, we got the 48-footers and the 58-footers. They do not go on the ships because they don't fit right, because they're too long. So they basically stay in the United States, from my understanding. They don't go all over the place. But all right, let's switch over cameras, and we'll go there. Yes, here we are. All right. would have to say one good thing of Sir waffling on there, as I've heard people say on the internet, which I believe is more British than American. Basically, gives me a chance to turn around and yeah, I believe I got these from, I want to say, Michael's. A little bit weren't there. I think they were cheaper than Woodland Scenics, but they weren't cheap. So go here. Yeah, the thing I wasn't able to find was the small ground cover. So what we'll do is we'll use this clump foliage from here, and I do have other clump foliage also. Underbrush. Foliage clusters, medium green, light green, sort of add variety. But since I'm thinking about having this more tree-ish, we're not necessarily tree-ish, but British strangers let they get beaten at their own game. Not right. Well, that's true. If you don't like the game, don't play. All right, so that's underbrush. Let's see. How do we use this? Oh, this looks like it's more for. All right. Use a highest count. So, all right. Let's see. First things first. Let's say we'll put the trees down first. Now it looks like I got a. One thing I didn't realize that I needed was at work we had the staple removers. Did not realize I needed them. All right. So I'll use a file to get open these up. Now the reason why I'm not using a pair of scissors because I wound up putting them someplace else, and they are not within arm's reach. All right. Trash bin there. Well, trash bag. Uh-oh. Looks like football is being discussed. Yeah, it's one of those things of once I realize that soccer and football or American football is, where football is talked about and replaces soccer worldwide, but the United States for some reason has as American football, which to me isn't the doesn't make as I mean, soccer makes more sense of being called football than American football. Yeah. All right. This looks like it has bases. Unfortunately, they do leave a setup there, so I'm not quite sure if I'm going to leave them there. I think. Now, it's one of those things that when it comes to sports. Oh, hello there, James. Thank you for coming in. I have my I got a tab for a tab on my browser that is set up for, I guess, when you're actually restarting your layout. But it's one of those things of haven't gotten to that tab yet. When I look at YouTube, I go through and go down and I open up all the videos that I want to watch as separate tabs. And then I, turn around and eventually watch them all. Probably not the best habit to have because I have sometimes way too many tabs open. But there's a good chance by the end of the week I will watch that. All right. There we go. Do the same thing with these. These look like they do not have the separate trunks. So we'll put those towards the front, and then we'll put the delicious trees with the separated bottoms in the back. Sort of help hide them. All right. So let's start gluing stuff on using the very popular Elmer's PVA glue. All right. Well, have a good night, Andy. Thank you for coming in. Yeah, it's one of those things of sometimes if you find a subject that you do like, you wind up talking way too much, or not necessarily too much, but you wind up losing track of time. All right, it's that way. I think the hardest thing is probably finding a flat spot for these. That's not quite a flat spot. There's a flat spot, or a flat-ish spot. And I think that's gonna be the greatest. All right, let's put that near the tracks, but not necessarily on the tracks. That looks like a good spot for that one. Onto the pine trees. I should have tried to figure out how to figure out where they would sit beforehand. All right, there's the spot. So try to find a spot where they would fit. Without I think that might be a smart idea, going with a very small one over here. Ooh, there's a spot. Trying to find a spot that they won't flip over. And sort of also have them sort of kind of randomized. There we go. I have a feeling some of these are out of shot. There's one right there. All right. Now let's get some of the clump foliage on here. Let's see. Do some of that for now. All right, let's see now. Well, hello there, Russ, race fan. Thank you for wandering in. So we're continuing adding foliage. I'm not going to go too nuts on some of this. It's very much like the real world, there are things that sort of closely get together. Not sure what that sound was, but we'll keep going. There's a big clump there. So maybe we'll. Now this is where the ridge is going to be. So might go with smaller pieces of stuff. Yeah, I'm feeling as I said, I got the tab open now. Is that the one where you start building your bench work, James? Because usually under bridges don't have as much usually don't have as much stuff on it. So we'll put stuff there, but not go too nuts on it. Let's grab some there. And also trying to hide a little of the stream, not much and all that, but enough to let people know that there's something there, but not necessarily a lot. Maybe not fully cover this because of letting some quote dirt show through. There's another large chunk of stuff that we can simulate something like this. It would maybe simulate a small maybe I mean, it looks like a very small tree. Yeah, we'll do it that way. I mean, it's not a tree. There's no branches to be seen and all that, but it's large enough that it could be a small tree. It's just that you just can't see the branches. Just block that down there. There's another small-ish tree. You can plop down. Make sure we put that there. Well, all right. See you soon, Artie. Probably on uh, I wouldn't say spamming the chat, but letting people know what he is doing. I think he's finally. I think he's. I believe he's starting his layout, and he wants people to know that he's starting his layout. There's that. There we go. I'm trying to. Well, we always, all of us are always trying to make it more prototypical as possible, and some are more better at it than others. But all right, well, I think this might be all for tonight. From my end, I got everything queued up for John at Schuylkill Valley Railway. He's on STS tonight. So, in this here, so basically the idea is the reason why I stop early is if somebody wants to turn around and have to, good night, Jerry. Someone needs to use the facilities or any, grab something to eat or something like that. They can without. That's one of the disadvantages with ending at at the top of the hour or anything like that is that all of a sudden it's like it winds up being very you have to stop during the whole thing. So if there's anything interesting that you want to keep on going, it gives I want to say it gives an extra some time to it's only 7:40. So the clock I've been using to keep time is not correct. So this is 7:40. So it's for some reason 6 minutes fast. Or now, all right, now it's set up correctly. So, but yeah, it's yeah, I think James is actually starting his starting his layout. He's going to be a lot larger than mine. But today is for Sidetrack Sunday is going to be John Schuylkill Valley Railroad, or Schuylkill Valley Railroad. Puh. So I guess I will be seeing people there. Uh, I I do remember there was apparently a debate of who was going to, who gets done quicker. No, I did not finish 500 trees. I bought them. Uh, I think they were bought by Michaels. I don't know if Michaels is in Australia, but it was there. They are. I want to say they are cheaper than woodland scenic trees, but they're still not cheap. I believe they're about each package was something like about almost $5 a piece. So you only get 4 trees in one, and the other one only had 5. So it's almost $1 a tree. So if you that it's a lot cheaper than what Woodland Scenics has. Yeah, it's one of those things of these are dioramas, so there's not that many trees on them, so that's why I went that direction. Why is Artie the only person in chat? Don't know. According to this, there's 3 left. I think everybody ran off once I said that I was getting ready to close down, so they all. I keep getting an error. I do not know what the error would be. But it is almost time to actually, sign off. So thank you for everyone who's here and is willing to listen to the end. Thank you for coming. I believe that the world needs more love, so find your passion, add some silliness to it, and spread it around. Goodbye, everybody.